Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. You may have noticed there have been a number of articles written of late about a fascinating political shift happening among women, particularly white suburban women. When all's said and done, women are leaving the political left, and we're talking leaving in droves. For example, polling from the 2022 midterm elections found a 27% shift towards the right and the GOP in general among suburban white women. Why is this happening? Why are we seeing politically, or particularly women, becoming so disaffected with the political left? Well, joining me to discuss this is actually someone who's actively red pilling suburban women all across America. Comedian, writer, and podcaster Bridget Fetisi. You may have seen Bridget on Joe Rogan's podcast. She's been on there a number of times. And if you are not subscribed to her YouTube channel, you're missing out. Her political and cultural commentary is absolutely wonderful. Just click on the link below and subscribe. You're going to love it. So, Bridget, welcome. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. I don't know if I'm red pilling or purple pilling. I don't know what I'm doing, Steve. I have no idea.
You're
I'm
doing
just out
something
there.
and you're
Yeah, I
doing it right.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
well, go ahead.
interesting. No, I
For
was just thinking about those numbers that you were talking about, and it's so fascinating to me that clearly it's just my internalized misogyny that women
that's right. Well, of course.
we're just doing what our husbands told us to do.
Exactly
Obviously,
right,
we have
right.
no
Are you
brains
done
of our
churning the
own.
butter yet? I mean, yeah, right. Well, for those who don't know, give us a sense, just really briefly, how you got involved in political and cultural commentary. I think at one level you always were. Comedy is social and cultural commentary, but now, I mean, you're really doing it more formally with Dumpster Fire, the show. You're tracking more with the headlines, the popular stories of the day. How did that come about?
I blame Twitter somewhat. It's interesting this question because it is the book I should write. I don't feel like I'm alone in what happened to me. Even if maybe what happened to me was more public, I say in many instances I kind of had to grow up in public
Yeah.
and come to these awarenesses and fall on my face and get things wrong. But I moved to Los Angeles in my 20s, like so many do, to be a writer and a comedian, and not even to be a writer and comedian, to be an actress. But I loved writing, and then someone dared me to do comedy, and I got into comedy. And around 2013, I got on Twitter and I found kind of all the late night writers and the Family Guy writers. And I never really got Twitter. I didn't understand it until then. And then I was like, these are my people. This is my tribe. And I thought it was a really good place to practice just writing because if you're trying to become a writer on a late night show or one of those topical shows, you would submit what's called a packet. And in that packet, you have to write 50 topical jokes and, headline jokes on the news of the day or monologue jokes for whoever is the host. And so I just thought it was a good place to practice. And then 2015 came along and so I started from Twitter. I got hooked up with all these editors and I started writing for Playboy as a columnist. And that was kind of a dream job. I started doing the Playboy Advisor, which was iconic. I grew up reading this and it was incredible. And then at the same time, I had not really been online, very online in the way that the kids these days kind of
Right.
call it. So I was almost like somebody woke up from a coma from the 90s into this culture that had completely shifted all around me with all of this critical theory and gender theory and queer theory, all of this stuff I had never even heard of. And I kept stepping on rakes on the left and right. I would write pieces for Playboy and then suddenly I would be getting attacked by the left, which I was like, I thought you guys were my people, but it was a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is just your internalized misogyny." What and my editors would joke that I was like the biggest bro on the whole staff. Because I just
Oh,
didn't know. I had no idea that things had changed so much, and then everyone lost their mind, and as I started
mhm,
writing jokes and seeing what was going on the left, it seemed like such obvious low-hanging fruit to
mhm,
make fun of, and you couldn't make fun of it. Once
right,
Trump got that well, you could make fun of it until Trump. That was the other reason I never really trusted the, like, "He's literally Hitler," is because for a year, he was just this buffoon that everybody used to make jokes about,
right,
and then
right, they didn't take him
overnight
seriously,
became
yeah,
this Hitler person. I was like, "You guys were joking about him for a year, so
right,
now suddenly he's this huge threat." So
right,
I felt, like there was some pretty obvious fodder, and I found myself self-censoring a lot, and I had gotten a manager because I also write scripts, and I remember sitting down with my cousin, who's my co-producer on pretty much everything, and we write a lot of scripts together and got management, and I said, "I can either lie
mhm,
and play the game and make the
mhm,
jokes everyone's making about Orange Man and whatever, or I can be honest, but will probably not work in this town."
right,
And she said, I know you. You're
yeah,
not gonna be I know you're not gonna be able to just shut your mouth and play some game, so
right,
do what you've gotta do." And that's how I got caught in the crossfire of the culture war. Then suddenly I was on Ben Shapiro's election special in 2018. That was my first media hit, and he had me on as an independent, and I that was kind of the beginning of this absolutely insane ride that I've been on.
it's so fascinating, I've heard you refer to yourself as politically homeless, you're not alone in that, I know, Matt Taibbi's talked about that, and but you did used to call the political left home. Was there
Yes.
was there something particular to it? Was it the refusal to entertain even the slightest bit of dissension? Was what turned you off so much by the left in particular?
It really this is the interesting thing I think we all have to be aware of no matter which side we're coming from, because there was obviously a certain amount of rejection I was experiencing from what I would have considered my tribe.
Mhm.
As I started being more just like, "Hey guys, what? Men and women aren't different." Just like very, you
Right.
can't say that on
Very
Twitter. That's
basic thing.
crazy.
Right. Right.
Pre-Elon, people forget you couldn't say that. You'd be banned.
Right,
That
right.
and still on other platforms, you kind of have to dance around these
Yeah.
topics. So, it was this kind of totalitarian ideological hold on everything that I always thought the left was the artists and
Mhm.
the people who are pushing the boundaries and the people who are bucking against authority, not appealing to
Yeah.
authority,
Mhm.
and
Speaking truth to power and, yeah.
what even just not so stick in the mud and not
Mhm.
and suddenly they were like clutching their pearls about
Mhm.
everything,
Mhm.
and you couldn't say things, and there was this censorious kind of um vibe that existed not just in government but also in tech, and these are huge massive
Yeah.
power structures that are now working in lockstep together, and this was in 2015, 2016.
Mhm.
And I'm just I think like a rebel and a little bit of a contrarian by nature, and I was not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So part of it was just seeing the writing on the wall. Part of it is my own nature. Part of it is was experiencing that rejection. And I think that's where people have to be careful because, Michael Malice has often said, take one red pill, not the whole bottle. And I think I've seen this happen with people where suddenly they're like, well, the left has a lot of control. And then it's full on anti Semitism or
Mhm.
full on, there are tunnels under the Getty
Mhm.
and QAnon kind of stuff. So I'm not sure where people stop once I think you have to be very careful that that very real feeling of being rejected doesn't lead you to being kind of crazy
Yeah,
and
swing
reactive.
the
Right.
pendulum to the other side. Yeah, I think it's interesting because once you feel like you've been burned by one ideology, like you say, you can go to another ideology to burn back, or you could just almost just throw away ideology or just be suspicious of all of them. And I think that's where kind of the new sort of populism is rising, not just here but throughout
Mm,
Europe as well. Um, because scholars talk about populism being very trans political, in a partisan sense. So partisanship, this right versus left, conservative versus liberal, is comprised of a horizontal animosity, left versus right. But populism redefines the political animosity vertically.
right.
People versus political class, ruled versus rulers. And so it tends to transcend the horizontal partisan divide of left versus right, or liberal versus conservative. And I'm wondering the extent to which this political homelessness that you talk about actually contributes to redefining politics in a more populist sense. In other words, the disaffected liberal is not necessarily going fully to the right, ideologically speaking, but they may team up with the right in order to push back against those in power to impose their lunacy on others.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that are somewhat you would think, "Oh, those are just conspiracy theories," are kind of open conspiracy
Yeah,
theories. Like
yeah,
I'm obsessed with the farmers in Germany
yeah,
protesting, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't I'm not on the ground. I don't know enough about what's really going on to understand fully, but we saw this in the Netherlands.
Mhm.
There was stuff going on in Sri Lanka. There's all of this top down WEF imposition on what people should and shouldn't be doing with certain types of fertilizers, and it
Mhm.
does feel like an almost oligarchical land grab if you really look at it. I'm obsessed with the natural asset companies. I don't know if you've been following this at all. That is crazy and somewhat terrifying and completely under the radar. By the way, audience, you have until January 18th to go to the SEC website and register your dismay with natural asset companies as they debate about whether to make this
Mm.
part of the stock exchange, this new asset class, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So there are these things that are happening where I guess even me of 3 years ago would have thought people were being, even in the midst of the pandemic when you saw everybody kind of rewriting society, these people in power, I would have been like, "Ah, is it just this, like, global and now I'm like, "Ugh, here's the
There's
Alex
something
Jones
to
was right jar."
it.
Whatever
Yeah.
that meme is, where it's like, and you don't wanna go full conspiracy either, but, I've had Jacob Siegel on, and he's brilliant, and he wrote a brilliant long article for Tablet about the kind of censorship industrial complex, and
Yeah,
really
yeah.
one of the darkest because I have Dumpster Fire, but I also have a podcast, Walk-ins Welcome, which is much more like this, conversational, where I interview people about whatever is interesting me, really, and that article was chilling. It was truly one of the most chilling discussions I've ever had, but all of this stuff kind of goes under the radar and people are like, "Harvard," like,
Yeah, right, right,
that's the stuff that gets the top of the kind of fighting.
right,
So,
right.
I
Yeah,
don't know. It's definitely I'm obsessed with this independent contractor rule that the Biden
mhm.
administration is basically just trying to decree. It's not even a law.
Right, right. Yeah,
So these are the
the
things.
mechanisms of control are so fascinating, aren't they? In a
Mhm.
technocracy, because, in a technological society, um, it requires an expert class, that supposedly alone has the competence to be able to run the technocracy sufficiently. And then an ideology seems to come out of that. C.S. Lewis actually talked about this back in the 1940s, kind of what he called the sort of the evil genius of the modern technological world. And that is an ideology that says that you are most free when I, the expert, are most in control.
Right.
Right? Because
Right.
I alone have the competence and the expertise to be able to restructure life and the world around your own desires, your own ambitions. It was really interesting because Lewis argued that the tradition, we were just talking about traditionalism before we went live here, but he argued that traditionalist societies were societies that recognized that there was some kind of divine meaning and purpose in the world. And the human being's fundamental question was, how do I conform my life into a harmonious relationship with that divine meaning and purpose? I think in
Mm,
many ways that is sort of the 12-step program in a
yes.
nutshell in many respects. And the answer was, well, through wisdom and virtue and all that sort of stuff. But he argued in the modern age, what made the modern age so bizarre and so unique historically is it didn't care about divine meaning and purpose at all. It just saw blind nature out there and nothing more. And so what the modern world, by tapping into scientific rationalism, what the modern world promised to do is not so much provide a way for you to conform your life to the divine meaning and purpose around you. No, the modern world's going to conform the meaningless, purposeless world to your own ambitions and your own desires. And the way they do it is through technology
Right.
and mechanisms of manipulation, basically, if you think about it. But you need experts on the top to be able to operate that system. And so they teach you, in effect, you are most free. Your desires will be most realized if I'm most in control. So it does have a very sinister side to it. I think just in the
Mm.
very DNA of the modern age. And then it does lend itself, obviously, to all kinds of sinister actors in the live. Klaus Schwab. I mean, how do you make a guy like that up? I mean, at the
How is
W.
he real? He makes me feel like we really might be living in a simulation. There's so much to what you just said that makes me think, my brain explode in a million different thoughts. One thing is I had this woman who's kind of she does like all this art with AI, and Agnieszka is her name. She and I were talking about how there's this w she's very pro AI, but when you hear people talk about AI often, there is this almost godlike worship of
Mm.
technology. The
Mhm,
way
mhm.
that it's replaced this idea of a supreme being or something that you appeal to, and the other interesting thing that struck me is on all sides of the aisle, this is something I just can't relate to, and this might just be my personality. This appeal to authority,
Mhm.
daddy Trump, daddy government, daddy somebody fix this for me.
Right.
That is very um I would like to see a society that's less constantly appealing to authority. Walter Kern, who I'm not sure if you've ever had him on, but you should. He's just brilliant and hilarious. He was just tweeting about how he doubts the Supreme Court loves all of these states coming with their election squabbles, like a father who's having to deal with his kids in their board game fights,
Right.
like
Right, right.
having to deal with dealing like, go play with figure it out yourself. This is
It's
a
a
state
great
problem.
analogy.
So
Yeah,
great. Walter
yeah.
is amazing. One of the best, I think, most brilliant minds of our time and insightful. And yeah, I think that we live in I know they've said it's a Chinese curse or whatever that we live in
We live in
interesting times,
interesting
but we
times.
do live in such I especially having a young child, I joke with my husband, I don't know whether I should be teaching her how to build a computer and hook up solar to like electricity, or if I should be teaching her how to grow food and prepare for life without the grid.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Is she going to be in Mars, or is she going to be
Right.
battling over the last can of cranberry sauce?
Can I pick up on that? Because when you were on Rogan, I think it was the last time, some months back, you made a comment there, that really struck a chord with me. You said, becoming a mom radicalized you." Do you remember saying something like that? It
Yeah.
you said so it made you a single issue person, as a result.
Yeah.
Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it radicalized me in many ways, and in the first way, there was always this sense of like, good luck, effers, I'm out of here, and the buck stops with me, and I don't have to really. Suddenly, I'm like, oh, I have to care about. I mean, I kind of cared about what I left behind, but there was not a personal genetic investment in a being that I love, that I, God willing, will leave this earth before them,
Right.
and they're going to be hopefully, resilient and have to be stewards of this world. So I didn't have, that's a weird feeling to have,
Yeah,
like, a
yeah,
connection beyond you
yeah,
it's indescribable. So that was the first radicalizing moment of, oh, I've got to care a little more than I do now. I'm invested in the future in a way that I could have given lip service to, but
yeah.
maybe I didn't have this biological feeling about. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was, I could look at these culture wars, and much like the 90s girl that I am, I joke lately like I'm politically homeless and all, aka politically useless. Not wrong. Um and I could be like the sneering 90s cool girl in the back of the class, making fun of everything and being like, I don't care because I'm not invested. And
Right.
now I'm like, am I going to have to join a school board? Probably, probably. It's not. I mean, I was fighting for women before I had a daughter,
Mhm,
because that is something in the culture that it was one of the hills I would die on. Just
mhm,
being able to articulate that there should be spaces for women and children. These are protected spaces we've
mhm.
fought for. We should not surrender them to people who want to take them over. And so I've been very vocal on that matter. And now I have a daughter, and I'm like, no, you can't go into the park bathrooms,
Right.
man who's dressed like a woman. And I don't want to have to worry about this at when she goes to camp, that a non-binary camp counselor is sleeping with a bunch of young girls. I don't know why this should be controversial, but
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
And I don't want this confusing. We were joking the other day because she's starting to learn pronouns, but she's getting them wrong, because pronouns are inherently very confusing, which is why they tell you to say the names of people instead of pronouns, because when they're this little, they don't, pronouns are just confusing when you try
Right,
and explain it. No,
right.
me is you and you is me.
Right,
Get it?
right,
Uh, it's very so it's already very confusing to a
right,
child, and now you're saying they, them for like, what are you doing to these
right,
kids?
right,
And I'm
right,
gonna
right.
have to fight that. I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to get up and say, "No, you're not brainwashing my kid with this lunacy, because life is confusing enough, and they don't need this should teach them math and how to read. You look at the literacy rates in this country and the math and where we're falling behind, and this is the crap you're spending your time on in school. It is because you don't actually have to get tested on that as, a teacher. No one can hold you accountable if your kid is, I don't know. So yeah, I've clearly become very passionate about this stuff in a way that is a lot more I'm more invested personally than I was before when I could comment on it, but I really didn't have any real skin in the game. And I think being a parent, you just have skin in the game.
Yeah.
Literal skin in the game.
Literal, yes, right, right, you're right, the literal genetic skin. But you touched on something there, which I found so interesting, where you do definitely begin to see this rift between the traditional left, which was the more liberal left, and this new progressive left. The liberal left is very pro democratic. It's very pro free speech and it loves science and it makes distinctions between genders and now you've got this wokeness that is particularly disturbing for women. It's odd because wokeness, as I understand it, is it's basically the sacralizing of the victim. It's the it's this I've heard it put, it's the sanctification of the oppressed, which
Right.
which is so so
And
sta
everything is viewed through the lens of power,
exactly, the
as
oppressor
if that's the
versus the
only
oppressed.
way people interact ever.
Which it's really interesting because it makes sense if that C.S. Lewis grid is still echoing there. If the modern world, if the classical world traditionally was about virtue and wisdom, and so forth, the modern world is about manipulation. It's about power. It's about conforming reality to my own desires and ambitions. So I get it. I get. They're just drawing from the physics of our modern technocratic age. But with but women are it's very interesting because I always, we're supposed to be on the side of the victim. We're supposed to be on the side of the oppressed. But when you sacralize the victim in that manner, exactly like where a victim where the only way we can see reality is through victim victimizer oppressed oppressor. When you do that, it's something fascinating happens because women were always supposed to be, a very important constituent of the victim class, and rightly so, historically speaking. But yet now it appears that women are more and more they're being they're being alienated from this victim class. I'm thinking again, like Anna Kasparian was even got in trouble with. I think she brought up the birthing person language and how that just absolutely offended her. No, it's a mother. What are you talking about? Or you look or the transgender athlete situation, which always goes in only one direction. It's always men. Biological males wanting to compete with with biological females. It doesn't go the other way around. It
Even if it does, no one cares.
Right, right,
No one
right,
cares.
right,
Like,
right,
and gee, why doesn't anyone care?
right, right, right. What
It's
is
just
that? But what is it about wokeness and women? There's something about wokeness or some things about wokeness really, really turning off women right now.
well, I think this circles back to exactly how you started this, where you're seeing these suburban moms leaving the party in droves or taking this turn to the right because they have kids. They're seeing a lot of this stuff affecting their kids, their mental health. They have kids who are coming home and are saying they're non-binary. It's not just school, it's also TikTok. It's socially everywhere. And so I think there's this turning away because of a lot of the reasons that I was radicalized as a mother. And then yes, you're generally not and this is what bothers me is this victimhood is currency in our society, and
Yeah,
particularly in the world you and I inhabit.
right,
It is everywhere. It is if you're a child, it is if you're a teenager, it's like kids now lead with, all of their disorders and whatever meds they're on, and you can easily be a pundit and say, "I've been oppressed," and
yeah,
it wouldn't be a lie. Big tech is, censoring us, also not a lie,
right.
and donate, and it's a way to kind of kick that, like, victim bucket, and I try very hard not to do that because and this is why I'm still poor. Um, I try hard not to do that even when it happens to me because it fundamentally goes against everything that I'm preaching, which is that we should not be leading with victimhood. It is cynical and offers people nothing. We need to be leading with resilience and but it's I totally understand why people do it because you are often, particularly if you're a right wing commentator, you are being censored, demonetized, and how else are you going to survive? So
And it has instant social capital, like you
it
said,
has
to be
instant
the
social
victim is to have the moral
capital.
high ground, and yeah,
This
yeah,
idea of getting canceled is true, but also you can use it to your benefit if you're savvy enough. Not everybody is,
right.
and those are horror stories, but then some people are, and they can use it to accelerate their profile. And so I think that there's something happening in the wokeness or whatever, however we want to call it. I feel like wokeness is the really only way to define this
Right.
kind of blob that's eating everything.
Yeah.
It does seem to it does seem to I mean, goes back to what I always joke about on Dumpster Fire, patriarchy so crafty. It does seem to be like
That is the irony, isn't it?
men are making these decisions in
It
their
is
own
ironic.
self-interest. Yeah.
We men are gonna conquer women's sports now, that's right.
It's just I always joke, I'm like, I was never even when I was in high school and I had a, very feminist teacher in English because that's where you learn about feminism is that whatever that teacher you have is generally.
Mhm.
And I was never really all that into it. I just thought it was a trick to get us into the workforce. And I didn't see the problem with men holding doors open for us. And now I've come full circle, and
Yeah.
turns out 16-year-old Bridget was right. No, and um, I just wasn't. I never really believed that the patriarchy was a thing, and now I'm like, maybe the patriarchy is a thing.
And it's on the side of the woke, that's the irony,
Maybe those
isn't it? Yeah.
feminists were right. Yeah. How did they Trojan horse their way into feminism? I'll never really know,
They
but they
really did. It's stunning. Well, yeah, they're destroying that's the ironic thing is that as how long women have fought to be able to have things like women's sport, like you said, particularly women-oriented spaces, and now that's being called, hateful and bigoted
bigot.
and sexist and transphobic, and
This
that's
is bananas, though, and I really am grateful that I got caught in the crossfire of the culture wars and ended up where I end up because I am free.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I see my friends who are on the left wing and now they've become parents, but they're still entrenched in Hollywood or the left wing comedy or whatever it might be. And I can see the cognitive dissonance.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like you know something's not right with this. You know it's
right.
not right for your sons, you know it's not right for your daughters. The way they talk about so many things is absurd and you can't say anything and you have to kind of play along and dance and I don't have to do that. I can come out and say this is nonsense.
And I wonder to what extent fear is the operating force there because of the of woke. It's not just the lunacy of wokeness; it's the heresy hunting that's such an intrinsic part of it. That
Yep.
the refusal to entertain even the slightest bit of dissent. The technical term, as I understand, it's called radical perspectivalism, a fancy schmancy
Mm,
way of just saying that one confuses their perspective with exhausting reality. And it goes beyond that too, because it defines absolutely the moral parameters of that reality. So there's no tolerance for transgression. Every sin is
yeah.
defined as a crime. Even the Bible makes a distinction, but not every sin is a crime, which makes wokeness in that sense radically puritanical, Taliban-esque, in a way. Do you see
I got in trouble for saying that a long time ago. I was
Did you
like,
get in trouble?
"ISIS tore down statues too, I'm just saying," and then everybody was
That's
like
right. That's right. Yeah, they sure yeah, very, very iconoclastic. That's right. And then
Nobody
they put
liked
up
that
their own,
one.
and then they freak out when like the satanic altar or whatever in Iowa State. They freak out. No, you can't knock it down. It's just like, well, wait a minute now. So
It's
I
so
mean,
weird. It's such a weird, strange time. I mean, even recently, all that stuff outside the White House, I was like,
yeah, yeah.
Where's the media?"
Yeah, yeah. Where's the yeah, or the insurrection police here? Exactly.
Yeah,
But
it's
but I
very
But I think that's what I mean. Everything has become partisan. Everything has become
yeah.
political. So there's nothing objective at this point. We're seeing that going all the way down to the distinction between you know sex and gender, and
Mhm.
the whole caste system with race and the like. Um, it just seems that so many people are kind of held captive inside wokeness because they're so afraid of being branded the heretic, and then you get excommunicated. You get the cancel culture comes in and casts you off.
Yeah, and that's powerful and very, basic fear
Yeah,
of being cast out of your
social outcast.
tribe.
Yeah,
This touches on our most basic lizard brain stuff.
yeah,
So I have a lot of compassion for, you know, everyone in these situations, and in the past several years, 7 years really, I guess going on 8, have been hard on people, families. There's been so much, I mean, falling outs, and people have been it's been tough on people, and then financially and physically, and um I try to really stay grounded in compassion for all people, even as much as I don't necessarily agree with the means people are trying to voice their frustration with. Let's say they feel frustrated that the government is quote unquote funding a genocide in Gaza or whatever, and they feel powerless and they're blocking freeways. I will actively be like, "You're idiots. You're not getting people onto your side." But I try to have compassion for I try to have some kind of good faith interpretation of why they might feel inspired to
yeah,
do that or
yeah,
compelled to do it.
yeah,
I've come a long way since. I was never really an activist though either. I think that's like also a different type of personality.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I feel like I know a lot of people who came from the left and came to the right, but when I really learned their stories, they were an activist on the left, and then they became more of a right-wing activist, but they're just kind of activists by nature, whereas I really came from, like, I was a liberal because I was lazy. Like, I was really just like, okay, I've said it for many, many years on Dave Rubin's show, this idea of factory settings where it was just like I was like a self-driving car,
yeah. It's
and I
just the
just
air we
went.
breathe, and you
Yeah,
just go with
I
it.
was
Yeah,
just raised that way. It was around the
yeah.
people I was around, and I always joke, like, I don't think I knew anyone pro-life until I was in my 30s.
Right, right.
Like,
That's
and
right,
then got out of that bubble. I
right.
was like, "These women exist?
Yeah,
Didn't
right,
know that."
right, right. Yeah, trad-wise. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
so
Yeah,
it's been. I think we have to have. I mean, look, this year is gonna be very tough
yeah,
on people.
yeah. It's gonna be rough. But you're bringing up empathy is so key because, wokeness does seem to strip people away, strip that kind of empathy away from people because either you're woke or you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're all
Yeah,
kinds of phobe, and those labels allow you to hate. those
But we
people. They
I see this on the right too, and
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it. I'll call people a bunch of freaking commies. We there's still that it's hard not to do.
Right.
It's also talk about very um very well, first of all, if you're a comedian, being hyperbolic is the
Yeah.
most
Right.
fun thing you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But I do see it. It's not like it's just a there's dehumanizing language on all sides of the
Yes.
aisle,
Yes.
right
Absolutely.
now. And
Absolutely.
we all have to be careful of that, even if it is hilarious sometimes. Mm, But you're right. It does, I think on the left, there's more, it's like weaponized empathy.
It
They're better at weaponizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a power structure behind it. So you can it's exactly what you were saying with the statues. You can burn down, you can inflict $2 billion worth of damage on our cities all across the country, and basically nobody goes to prison. Whereas, you have a bunch of overheated people, storming the Capitol, and it's the worst crime since 9/11. And you're like, so it
My
seems.
uncle always says it was a buffoons who were rioting, which I love. It's like the best way to I was like, "Do you think it's was an insurrection?" He said, "No, it was buffoons who were rioting." And
Yeah,
I was like,
that's
"That's such a
just
funny
like what we
way."
saw, right, 2 years prior or so. There's just this sense, though, that I think, on the left, you're allowed to
Right.
be at least verbally violent,
And
if
yeah,
the person has transgressed politically correct norms.
this is the righteous anger that I understand
Yeah,
on the right. This
yeah,
is the complete this is I have a friend and he is always saying, even in the politically homeless space in the IDW, there's still this sense of, oh, the left and all of the, stuff that they're doing, but the right. You always have to kind of but the right, but the right, but the right. Coming from the left, that is almost instinctive, even still, even coming to the center or wherever I'm center right, wherever you might consider me, depending on who's viewing this. I'm left wing or I'm like a Rorschach test for wherever you are. Um, someone might be watching and be like, "This girl's still a libtard," and someone else is like, "That MAGA Karen needs to
yeah,
shut up."
right. That far right
Yeah,
radical. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
doesn't whatever. I do think there needs to be more but the left.
Mhm.
It can't only be coming from the the right who's saying that, because there is an uneven application of standards, and that is very clear to anybody who's watching who isn't in the bubble, and that will create resentment, rage, frustration, feelings of it's not, I mean, that for all the talk about like the unfair system, which there is, when you this is also why I hate the like uh journalism. No matter how much you hate journalists, you don't hate them enough. There's a lot of good journalists out there doing God's work. And when you look down this thread that I found on Twitter of all the work that basically local journalists did and holding politicians and corporations feet to the fire for corruption and all this stuff, that we need that function. This is all stuff we can kind of get together, I believe, and like civil forfeiture, all the all this stuff that never gets covered enough, and I think we could all unite on.
Yeah.
It's instead we're kind of told to be divided,
Mhm.
and a lot of it is because of this uneven application of standards, and this is where you see who really has the power,
Yeah.
institutional power.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
maybe the right has some in the Supreme Court now and in some of the courts, but all the institutional power is on the left, all of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Media, academia, you name it.
Yeah.
And like the technological
Mhm.
centers and education, it's insane.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that feeling that you're kind of the underdog is not incorrect.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
that's why guys like they love guys like Trump because they feel
Yeah.
like, at least
Exactly.
somebody's just going like an Elon who's like giving a
Exactly.
middle finger to these
Exactly.
power structures.
Exactly. Exactly. That's it. That in the end, that's all you if you want a devoted following, that's all you need to do. Give the middle finger to those in power. And yeah, and there is just a sense too that there is a kind of automatic loyalty that comes your way with that because people do see, oh man, you're standing up to the power. Very similar to what the left had in say the 60s and
Yeah.
70s, where they were speaking, they were pushing back against power. We're seeing this now on the right and in Europe as well. Again, for lack of a better term, left and right. It's just the left seems to be so caught up with the wokeness, with the power structures, with the WEF and the EU and all that sort of stuff. The right really, the dissident right really just seems to be the place where disaffected souls, as it were, can just at least find some reprieve from all the crazy
This
wokeness and lunacy.
Yeah, it does seem though like when like you said to the populism thing, this is kind of those moments where you'll see that Overton window come full
Yeah,
circle
yeah,
and you'll see the Bernie Bros and
right,
the Marjorie Taylor Greens or
right.
something
You got it.
agreeing on something.
Yeah, you got it. Or the RFK Jr. and Trump's folks saying, "Yeah, maybe that'll be a good ticket." It's like what they're completely on different. If we're thinking
Yeah,
horizontally, they're on
right.
completely different. But if you're thinking vertically, they're united in that sense,
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
seems to be that's the new politics. And for me, I love it because it enables us to be able to talk to people of all different persuasions all united around the fact that we just think lunatics are in charge right now, and we need to do something to protect our kids from it, and help build up sort of a parallel economy in some way, shape, or form, so as to be able to live a life of integrity in the midst of these woke power structures, and you are certainly doing that. That's for sure. You're doing an amazing job. How can people find out more about your show and everything that you do? You put out a lot of content.
I do. I'm
Yeah,
all over the place, but not really. My I always joke. I even though I talk about politics, nobody's coming to me to. I don't want to tell people what to do or how to vote. I want to get empower people to get out of their own way. So we put out a lot of
mhm,
content on Fantasy.com. You can go and subscribe. Please support. But we have a book club. We're reading Brave New World. We read a different book every month,
great book.
which, by the way, is way creepier than I remember it.
Yeah,
That book is creepy and accurate.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we do a write club. So we do writing prompts. I really try to encourage people to be creative and build and read and get out of their own way. And
Mm,
so, and also have these discussions. And we have dumpster fire behind the scenes, which is basically, we have what we put out for free. And then we do just a straight recording. And that's behind the paywall, is just like all the banter and the ridiculousness and yeah, you can find everything I do there. And you can find me on Twitter at Bridget Phetasy or on Instagram, where I will post my adventures in trying to make pita bread. I just really, I really want to try to be sanity and levity are my two words that I keep coming back to for
I love it.
2024. So I really appreciate what you're doing and just for having me on. I think this was really a great you gave me a lot to think about, I appreciate that.
Well, one of your most adoring members is my sister, my
Oh,
youngest
yeah.
sister, and she just loves you and loves
We
every
do workouts. I do workouts.
Yeah,
That's
that's
how I
right.
became such good friends with her, and I've become friends with these women. We started it during the pandemic because I really am I want to be, the kind of person I want to inspire my daughter to be.
Mhm.
How can we get stronger? How
Right,
can we become more competent? These are things
right.
we need to how can I become educate myself more or just read more?
Yeah,
I want to I there's time we spend, particularly having a daughter who's obsessed with all things universe. You
yeah. Oh,
first of all,
neat.
you're like, how does this miracle even exist?
Yeah, yeah.
This little tiny zone where we have
Yeah,
water, and I
yeah,
mean in this whole how? It is,
yeah.
and we're going to spend our time like fighting on Twitter? No. No, we need to fight for what matters. That's important.
That's
I'm not denying that there are, like, I think also we live in this little miracle of America with these
yeah,
democratic principles and free speech, and it's a miracle in the history of humanity, and it's like miracle upon miracle upon miracle,
yeah.
and we can't squander it. That
Right.
is
Amen.
my message this year. It's just been is to really look at how we're so yeah, join if the women want to join our community. We work out every day at noon Central Time on Zoom, and it's just been I feel really grateful to be able I'm glad that even though it's been a wild ride and sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know anything. Um, I'm so grateful that I'm free and
Yeah,
here. What
yeah,
a
yeah.
miracle.
Yeah, it is. It is a miracle, and then to have this network society where we're not limited to proximity in terms of
Yeah.
relationships. We can literally be friends with people all over the world and have this cyber community that's very real, and it really
Mhm.
does impact lives, and that's
It
exactly what
does.
you're doing.
And just people, you're not alone. I don't want people to feel like they're alone out there feeling
Right,
crazy
right.
because it's easy to think. I mean, I know that if it had not been for Twitter and I hadn't fallen into the, right wing, wherever the heck I
Echo
am,
chamber, yeah,
if I
yeah.
hadn't found these people who are also stumbling, if I hadn't been honest and opened my
Right,
mouth, I would have thought I was all alone. And that is a dangerous place to be in your own mind.
yeah.
So I want people to know that you're not crazy. Maybe you're crazy, but the
Right.
world is crazy too.
That's right. That's right. I will try to find some sanity, along the way. Gang, click on the link below, subscribe to Bridget's YouTube channel, her Instagram, go to their website. All the links are down below. If you know any disaffected liberals in your life, make sure to share Bridget's work. They'll love you for it.
It's always the
Thank you, Bridget.
girlfriends and the wives.
Oh, the girlfriends and the wives. That's right. Just keep red pilling, purple pilling, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. You're doing an amazing job.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Bridget.
much for
You're
having
wonderful.
me.
Let's do it again soon.
Definitely.
Awesome.